The kitchen clock read 7:15 p.m., but it felt as if time had stopped inside that house. The living room was immersed in silence, broken only by the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Claire stood by the sink, washing the dinner dishes. The sound of running water seemed too loud, but it was also a distraction. A way not to think. On the other side of the kitchen, Sophie, just 7 years old, quietly finished her meal. The little girl moved her fork slowly across her plate, drawing invisible shapes in the mashed potatoes. "Mommy, can I leave the table?" she asked softly. Claire turned, drying her hands on the dish towel. The smile she tried to force seemed almost real. "You can, sweetheart. Are you finished?" Sophie nodded and left, carefully carrying her plate to the sink. She always did that, quiet, considerate, as if she were afraid of being a bother. Claire looked at her daughter and felt her heart ache. She's so small. I don't want her to grow up like this. I don't want her to learn that silence is love. Claire turned back to the dish she was washing but was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Her body tensed, as though an invisible string pulled her backward. She knew what was coming. "Claire." Adam's firm voice echoed through the house. He walked into the kitchen with heavy steps, still wearing his suit, loosening his tie. The smell of his cologne mixed with the weariness of the day. He stopped in the doorway, scanning the room as if inspecting it. "This again? The house is a mess. What do you even do all day?" Claire lowered her gaze, trying to steady her trembling hands. I made dinner and took care of Sophie. I worked a little from home too." Adam scoffed and grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl, as though he hadn't even heard her. He shot a quick glance at Sophie, who was sitting on the living room couch with her sketchbook. "At least one of you is quiet. It's good that she's learning not to be a burden." Claire felt her face burn. She wanted to respond, but the words got stuck in her throat. It was always like this. She was a shadow, a silent presence that existed only to serve. Adam left the kitchen, heading straight for the living room, where he turned the television on at full volume. Claire looked at Sophie and saw her looking back. The girl seemed sad. She was gripping her pencil tighter than necessary, as if that was her way of letting out frustration. Claire sat down next to her on the couch, trying to sound calm. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" Sophie held up the paper. It was a house, but not just any house. The windows were small and closed, the doors locked. There was no sun. "It's our house," she said softly. Claire felt her heart sink. "Why did you draw it like this?" Sophie looked at her mother with big, innocent eyes. "Because our house is sad." The words were simple, but they hit Claire like a punch. She felt the tears well up but swallowed them down, as she did every day. This can't be her life. This can't be my life. Later that night, Claire sat on the bed, hugging her knees. Adam was already asleep beside her, lightly snoring. The room was dark, but she couldn't close her eyes. She picked up her phone and, with trembling fingers, found the contact for Lindsay, her closest friend. For a moment, she hesitated. What if Lindsay judged her? What if she didn't understand? But then she thought of Sophie, of that house with closed windows. "Are you awake? I need to talk," she typed. The reply came quickly. "Of course. Want me to call?" The phone rang almost immediately. Claire answered and stepped out of bed, moving into the hallway. "Claire, what happened?" Lindsay's concerned voice echoed through the phone. Claire tried to hold back the tears but couldn't. Her voice came out choked. "I don't know what to do anymore, Lindsay. I feel small. He makes me feel like I'm nothing. I don't know how to get out of this." On the other end, Lindsay took a deep breath. "Claire, you're so much stronger than you think. But I get it. Sometimes we need help to see what's wrong." Claire wiped her face with her sleeve. "And how do I do that? How do I change?" Lindsay's voice was firm but warm like a hug. "Have you heard of family constellations?" Claire frowned, confused. "Family a what?" "It's a kind of therapy that helps you see the family patterns we carry so often. We keep living out stories that started long ago, with our parents, grandparents, stories that aren't even ours but still hold us back. Claire was silent, digesting those words. The idea seemed too abstract, almost impossible. And how would that help? Because when you see what's wrong, Claire, you can change it. You can break the cycle. Maybe this will help you understand why you accepted living like this. And, more importantly, help you see a way out. Claire felt the weight of those words like a jolt in her mind. Break the cycle. She thought of her mother, Margaret, of the critical words she had heard her whole life. She thought of her father, silent and passive. She thought of Adam. And above all, she thought of Sophie. I don't want my daughter to carry this. I don't want her to grow up thinking this is love. The morning was cold and cloudy. Claire stood in front of a discreet building in the city center. She looked at the sign next to the door. Anna Lewis, Systemic Therapy and Family Constellation. Her heart was pounding. What am I doing here? She took a deep breath and went in. The quiet hallway echoed the sound of her shoes on the wooden floor. When she reached the reception area, a friendly assistant smiled. Good morning. Please have a seat. Anna will see you shortly. Claire nodded, sitting in an armchair. The walls were decorated with soft paintings, plants, and cozy lighting. It was such a contrast to the heaviness she felt inside. A few minutes later, a door opened. Anna appeared, a middle-aged woman with red hair tied in a bun, and a calm gaze that seemed to see beyond the surface. Claire, come on in. Claire stood up, adjusting her bag strap on her shoulder, and followed Anna into a spacious room. The space was warm and inviting. Bookshelves, a round table in the center, and small wooden figures neatly arranged on a tray. Claire sat in the armchair Anna indicated. Welcome, Claire. Make yourself comfortable. Anna sat across from her, a notepad on her lap. Claire looked around, feeling an overwhelming urge to get up and leave. I don't really know what I'm doing here. Her voice came out low, almost a whisper. That's okay. Anna replied gently. We can start from the beginning. What brought you here today? Claire hesitated. She fidgeted with her hands in her lap, staring down. I feel stuck. In my life, in my marriage. Like something is always pulling me down. Can you explain what that means? Claire took a deep breath. My husband, Adam. He controls me. He makes me feel small, like I'm nothing. And my mother. Her voice faltered. Anna waited patiently. My mother always told me I wouldn't be able to live alone. That I would never be good enough. Anna nodded, understanding. You grew up hearing those words. And now in your marriage, they're still alive, aren't they? Claire nodded, tears beginning to fall. I don't know who I am anymore. I just exist to serve, to not be a bother. Anna looked at her with compassion. Claire, often. The family patterns we experience in childhood follow us without us even realizing it. Words, behaviors, and beliefs. All of this can repeat in our adult lives. It's as if we're carrying weights that don't always belong to us. Claire looked up, confused. What do you mean by that? Anna stood and picked up the small wooden figures from the table. Let's try an exercise. I'd like you to help me arrange these pieces in the space, as a representation of your family. Start by choosing a piece that represents you. Claire looked at the figures for a moment, hesitant. She chose a small, lonely piece and placed it in the center of the table. This is me. Great. Now choose a piece for Adam. Claire picked a larger, more rigid figure, placing it very close to hers. Adam always feels bigger. He takes up all the space. And your mother? Claire took another piece, taller and distant, and placed it on one side, facing her figure. My mother. She's always there. Judging. Anna carefully observed the arrangement. And your father? Where is he? Claire chose a small figure and placed it almost invisibly, far from all the others. He never got involved. It was as if he didn't exist. Anna studied the arrangement for a moment. How do you feel looking at this, Claire? Claire remained silent. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at the pieces. I feel suffocated, small, like I've never had space to be myself. Anna nodded, her voice soft. Do you see the pattern here? Since childhood, you learned to stay quiet to please your mother and not bother your father. In your marriage, you're doing the same thing. Silence became your way of surviving. Claire lowered her gaze, feeling the tears run freely down her cheeks. I don't want this for my daughter. I look at Sophie. She's so small, but so observant. She's already learned to stay quiet, too. Anna moved Sophie's piece and placed it next to Claire's like a shadow. Sophie is looking to you, Claire, and you're showing her what love is, even if you don't realize it. What message would you like to give her? Claire looked at Sophie's figure, her voice barely a whisper. That love is safe, that she deserves to be happy and free. Anna smiled gently. And you, Claire? What do you deserve? Claire looked at Anna as though those words had struck her deeply. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. I don't know. It's okay not to know right now. The important thing is that you've started to see. Anna moved the pieces representing Adam and Margaret away from Claire's figure. Then, she placed Sophie's piece closer in a more protective position. I want you to look at this and say out loud, I deserve more. I deserve to be free. I can break this cycle. Claire hesitated, feeling her throat tighten. The words seemed too heavy to say. I deserve more. I deserve to be free. I can break this cycle. She closed her eyes, the tears falling as those words echoed within her. For the first time, Claire felt that maybe there was a way out. This is a beginning, Claire, Anna said with a welcoming smile. You've taken the first step. Claire opened her eyes, looking at the board in front of her. The pieces were still there, but now they looked different. Thank you, Anna. I don't know if I'm ready, but I want to try. And that's all that matters, Anna replied firmly. Claire left the office that afternoon, feeling the cold wind hit her face. She walked slowly down the sidewalk, as though each step carried a different weight. For the first time, the idea of change didn't seem impossible. She pulled out her phone and sent a message to Lindsay. I had my first session today. It was hard, but I think I found a way out. Thank you for helping me take this step. The response came quickly. I'm so proud of you. One step at a time, Claire. This is just the beginning. Claire put her phone back in her pocket and looked out at the gray horizon. Her life was still far from what she wanted, but something had changed. It was just the beginning. And sometimes, the beginning is all we need. The sunlight filtered softly through the kitchen window. Claire prepared breakfast while Sophie sat at the table drawing. The little girl swung her legs in the air, humming quietly. Claire watched her daughter, feeling warmth in her chest. That simple yet vibrant image reminded her of why she was trying to change. She promised herself, this ends with me. The sound of the front door opening made her tense up, but Claire took a deep breath. Adam entered as always, with firm footsteps and a heavy expression. Not ready yet? I'm running late, Claire. She placed a plate of toast and eggs on the table without responding. Adam pulled out a chair, casting a critical glance around the kitchen. You don't clean this house properly. It looks like everything's out of place. Before, those words would have pierced Claire like knives. She would have muttered an apology and shrunk away. But today she stopped and looked at him. The house is clean, Adam, and you have your coffee and breakfast ready. Maybe you could stop looking for problems where there aren't any. Adam's gaze froze. He set his utensils down hard. What did you say? Claire's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. I said you don't need to talk to me like that. Adam stared at her, surprised, as if he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. Sophie, sensing the tension, looked at her mother with wide eyes. Claire noticed and gave her a soft smile as if to say, It's okay. Adam didn't respond. He stayed silent, but his expression hardened. Don't start acting like you're someone, Claire. You're going nowhere. She didn't reply. Instead, she turned to Sophie. Sweetheart, Finish your drawing while I put things away." Claire pretended to be calm, but inside, her hands were trembling. Courage was still something new for her, small but growing. Later that afternoon, Claire sat on the living room sofa with Sophie asleep beside her, the teddy bear held tight against her chest. She picked up her phone and sent a message to Lindsay. "I stood up to Adam today. I told him he doesn't need to talk to me like that." Seconds later, Lindsay replied, "Claire, that's incredible. How did you feel?" Claire hesitated before typing. "Scared, but different. Like I took a step. Not a big step, but a small one." Lindsay replied quickly, "Small steps are all you need right now. I'm proud of you. This is the beginning." Claire put the phone down on the sofa and watched her daughter sleep. She gently stroked Sophie's hair, murmuring softly, "Mommy's trying, my love, for you." Later that night, Claire sat on the bed holding Sophie's notebook in her hands. That day's drawing caught her attention. The same house, but now with a small open window and a timid sun beginning to appear. Claire felt tears well up in her eyes. She feels it. Sophie notices everything. Maybe as small as it was, my change reached her. Suddenly, Adam entered the room, still irritated. He cast a critical glance at Claire. "Are you happy now? You think standing up to me is going to get you anywhere?" Claire looked at him, her heart racing, but she didn't respond. She knew arguing with him was pointless. Instead, she calmly closed Sophie's notebook and placed it on the nightstand. "Good night, Adam." Adam narrowed his eyes, as if her calm infuriated him even more, but he said nothing. He went into the bathroom, slamming the door. Claire lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Inside, she still felt small but also proud. "I can't change everything at once, but today I didn't shrink. Today I was a little stronger." That night, Claire pulled out an old notebook from the drawer and started to write. "Today I did something different. Not much, but enough to realize there's still something inside me that wants to fight. Maybe I don't know how to win yet, but I know I need to try. For Sophie. For me." She closed the notebook and put it away, turning off the light. The scene ends with Claire lying in bed, her eyes open but with a different expression. A spark of hope mixed with the quiet determination of someone beginning to break invisible chains. The morning began like any other. The sun filtered softly through the living room curtains, where Sophie played with her dolls on the carpet. Claire prepared the coffee, trying to ignore the weight in her stomach that had been growing since the day before. The sound of the front door opening made Claire's body stiffen. She knew Adam was home. He entered the kitchen with firm steps, dropping his briefcase on the table. "What is this house? It looks like nothing's changed since yesterday. Claire, what do you even do all day?" Claire took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice steady. "I take care of Sophie, and I do the best I can." Adam laughed derisively. "Your best? It's pathetic, Claire. You're worth nothing. I don't even know how I put up with you." Sophie dropped her dolls and looked at her mother with wide eyes. Claire noticed and forced a smile for her daughter, trying to calm her. "Go play in your room, sweetheart. Mommy will be there soon." Sophie nodded and left, clutching a doll by its arm. Her gaze, however, lingered on Claire before disappearing down the hallway. Once Sophie was out of sight, Claire looked directly at Adam. "Don't talk like that in front of our daughter. She doesn't need to hear this." Adam, surprised by Claire's firm tone, froze for a moment. Then he stepped closer, his gaze threatening. "Now you've got the nerve to challenge me? Don't start acting like you're someone, Claire. You're going nowhere. Without me, you're nothing." Claire felt her heart pounding, but she didn't look away. For the first time, she didn't yield. "Enough, Adam." Adam stared at her, shocked. He wasn't used to hearing no. He grabbed his briefcase forcefully and left, slamming the door. The sound echoed through the house, but this time Claire didn't cry. She stood there, breathing deeply, her heart still racing. Later, Claire sat in Anna Lewis's office. The room, with its large windows and green plants, felt like the only place where she could breathe. "How are you feeling today, Claire?" Anna asked, her voice calm. Claire sighed, nervously fidgeting with her hands. "I'm scared, Anna. Today I said enough. For the first time I didn't stay silent. But he's getting worse. He threatens, yells. He says he's going to take Sophie away from me. And deep down, I still hear my mother's voice telling me I'll never be able to live alone." Anna nodded, observing her calmly. "That fear you feel didn't start with Adam, Claire. It comes from much earlier, from the way you were taught to see yourself in the world. What your mother said about you still lives in your mind." Claire felt the tears begin to flow, but she didn't stop them. She said I was weak, that I would never accomplish anything on my own, and I started to believe it. I always believe it. Anna stood up and brought over the family constellation board with its small wooden figures. She placed Claire's piece in the center and asked her to choose other pieces to represent Adam and her mother, Margaret. Hesitantly, Claire placed Adam very close to her and Margaret even closer, almost crowding the central figure. "How do you feel looking at this, Claire?" Anna asked softly. Claire stared at the pieces, her voice barely audible. "Suffocated. It's like their voices trap me. They always tell me I'm not enough. And now Sophie is there, seeing all of this. She's in the middle, just like I was as a child." Anna picked up a smaller piece and placed it next to Claire, representing Sophie. "Do you see that you're repeating what you lived, Claire? Your daughter is learning the same lessons you did. That love hurts, that silence is protection. But you don't have to continue the cycle." Claire looked at the piece representing Sophie and felt a wave of sadness and anger at the same time. "I don't want her to grow up like this. I don't want her to think this is love." Anna smiled gently. "And you can change that, Claire. The simple fact that you're here, that you said enough, is already a sign that something is shifting. Every word you say, every act of courage, is showing your daughter a new path." Anna moved Adam's piece farther away and placed Claire and Sophie's pieces closer together in the center. "This is you today. It's not easy, but you're finding your strength. And you're not alone. Every step, no matter how small, is progress." Claire wiped her tears and looked at the pieces. For the first time, she saw a different arrangement, less suffocating. There was room to breathe. That night, Claire sat on Sophie's bed, watching her daughter sleep. The little girl held her teddy bear tightly, her hair spread across the pillow. Claire adjusted the blanket and whispered softly, "Mommy promised she would take care of you, and now I know I can." She got up and went to the kitchen. She took a small piece of paper and began to write. "I'm stronger than I thought. Sophie deserves a different future, and so do I. This ends with me." Claire pinned the note to the refrigerator next to Sophie's drawing, the one with the sad house and no sun. This time, she looked at it and saw a different future. A future where the windows would be open and the sun would shine. She turned off the kitchen light and returned to her room. For the first time, Claire felt like she was in control. It wasn't a miracle, nor a happy ending, but it was a beginning. And sometimes, the beginning is all we need to change. The morning began wrapped in a heavy silence. Claire sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and watching Sophie eat her pancakes with honey. Her daughter smiled between bites, distracted, and Claire allowed herself a small smile too. The peace, however, didn't last long. The front door swung open forcefully, and Adam entered with quick, heavy steps. Sophie shrank a little, her eyes filled with fear. Claire felt her heart race but took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "What is this house? It looks like nothing's changed since yesterday. Claire, what do you do all day?" She set the coffee cup carefully on the table, keeping her voice steady. "I take care of Sophie, and I do the best I can." Adam stepped closer, leaning over the table, his eyes narrowed and threatening. "The best? Your best is pathetic, Claire. Do you think you can act like some kind of saint now? Do you think you can defy me? Without me, you are nothing. You never were. Sophie dropped her fork and ran to her room without saying a word. The sound of her little feet echoed through the house, and Claire felt a quiet rage grow within her, a new flame, something she hadn't felt before. She stood up slowly and looked Adam directly in the eyes. "Stop talking like that in front of Sophie. She doesn't need to hear this." Adam froze for a moment, surprised by her firm tone. Then he laughed bitterly. "Now you've got a voice? That's funny. Let's see how long you can keep up this act." He grabbed his car keys and left, slamming the door behind him. Claire stood there for a moment, her heart racing and her hands trembling. But deep down, something was different. I didn't stay quiet. For the first time, I didn't stay quiet. Later, Claire was sitting in Megan's office. The room was bright, with books neatly arranged on shelves and a soft aroma of coffee in the air. Megan watched her attentively as Claire recounted the events of the day. "I've started to respond, Megan, but he's getting worse. He threatens me. Says he'll take Sophie away." Megan kept a firm expression, her voice calm and decisive. "Claire, what Adam is doing is emotional manipulation. He knows he's losing control, so he's trying to intimidate you." Claire looked down at her hands, uncertain. "But what if he succeeds? What if he proves I'm not capable?" Megan leaned forward, looking her directly in the eyes. "He doesn't have that power, Claire. His behavior speaks louder than anything else. And we're going to document everything. Messages, unannounced visits, witnesses, every threat. But you need to prepare." Calmly and securely, she handed Claire a list of practical actions. Save evidence of all of Adam's messages and threats. Open a separate bank account and start saving money. Research a safe place to live with Sophie when the time was right. Claire took the list and felt the weight of the responsibility, but also a small sense of relief. It was frightening, but for the first time there was a plan. "I'm going to do this. For me and for Sophie." That night, after putting Sophie to bed, Claire sat on the couch with a notebook and an envelope of documents in hand. Her notes were there, alongside printed copies of Adam's threatening messages. The weight of that decision felt overwhelming. A familiar voice in her mind whispered, "What if he's right? What if you can't do this?" Claire closed her eyes and heard Anna's words echo in her memory. "You don't have to carry the fear your mother left behind. You are not weak, Claire. You are choosing to break the cycle." She opened the notebook and began to write, letting her thoughts flow. "I am afraid, but I have something even stronger. The will to protect my daughter. Her love gives me courage. One step at a time. I will do this." She closed the notebook and wiped away silent tears. The next morning, Claire and Sophie sat together on the living room carpet. Sophie was drawing with focus, her feet bouncing in the air. "What are you drawing today, sweetheart?" Sophie held up the paper, smiling. It was a house, but this time with open windows and a bright sun shining in the sky. "This is our house, Mommy, with sunshine and everything." Claire sat silently, feeling a lump form in her throat as she held the drawing gently. "It's the most beautiful house I've ever seen, my love. And we'll get there. I promise." Sophie threw herself into her arms, hugging her tightly. Claire closed her eyes, smiling as she held the drawing against her chest. It was just a drawing, but to her it was a symbol of hope. One step at a time. "I'm closer than I was yesterday." The day started far too calm, like the stillness that precedes a storm. Claire was in the kitchen packing Sophie's lunchbox, her movements overly careful as if trying to turn routine into a distraction. Sophie appeared in the hallway, her colorful backpack on her shoulders and her sketchbook in her hands. "Mommy, today the teacher is going to hang my drawing on the mural," she said excitedly, her eyes glowing with pride. Claire knelt to adjust her daughter's coat, smiling tenderly. "That's amazing, sweetheart. Mommy is so proud of you." Sophie's hug brought a brief pause to the unease inside her. In these small moments, Claire found her strength. When the school bus honked outside, Sophie left, smiling and waving from the window. Claire closed the door and let out a long sigh. For a few minutes, the house returned to silence. A strange silence. A warning. Hours later, the front door opened forcefully, the noise echoing through the walls. Claire stopped in the middle of the kitchen, her fingers still wet from the dishes. Adam entered with heavy steps, his face filled with fury. "So this is it," he growled, waving a cell phone in the air. "You're saving money behind my back, Claire?" Claire's heart began to race. How did he find out? She tried to stay calm. "What are you talking about?" Adam stepped forward, his eyes blazing with anger. He turned the phone, showing the screen. It was the bank statement, an account in her name. "This, an account I didn't know about. Do you think you can deceive me? You are nothing without me, Claire." Nothing. She instinctively stepped back, but then she stopped. There was no more room to run. She remembered Anna's words. "He only has power over you if you allow it. Don't talk to me like that, Adam. And don't shout in my house." Claire's tone was firm but controlled. Adam laughed bitterly, his voice dripping with disdain. "Your house," he mocked, stepping even closer. "Everything you have is mine. This house, this life, all of it. If you try to leave, I'll take Sophie from you. You won't win, Claire. You're weak. You always have been." His words came like darts. Before, they would have pierced her soul. But now, something inside her refused to give in. Claire raised her head and looked him straight in the eyes. "You can say whatever you want, Adam, but you can't make me believe it anymore." Adam froze, as if he no longer recognized the woman standing in front of him. Claire wasn't trembling. She didn't look away. "This isn't over, Claire." His voice dropped to a low, threatening tone. "You're making a mistake." He grabbed his coat and stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the pictures on the wall rattled. Minutes later, Claire heard small footsteps in the hallway. Sophie stood there, frightened, holding her teddy bear. "Mommy!" Claire knelt and pulled her into a tight hug. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here. Everything will be okay." As she held her daughter, tears streamed silently down her face. She knew the time to act was closer than ever. Later, Claire sat in Anna's office. Her face was tired, but her eyes were steady, carrying something new: determination. "How are you feeling, Claire?" Anna asked softly. Claire took a deep breath, scared, but also stronger. "Today he threatened me. He said he'd take Sophie from me, but I don't believe him anymore. For the first time, I feel like I can fight." Anna smiled, her gaze full of admiration. "You're breaking the cycle, Claire. Every time you stand up for yourself, every word you say, you're showing both yourself and Sophie that there's a way out." Claire nodded, tears returning, this time tears of relief. "My whole life, I thought I had to be like my mother. That love was control, silence. But now I know it's not. I can teach my daughter something better." Anna picked up the family constellation board, positioning the pieces. She moved Adam outside the circle and placed Claire and Sophie together, closer in the center. "This is you now, Claire. A strong woman, a protective mother, and a person capable of living in peace." Claire stared at the pieces for a long moment and, finally, wiped her tears. "I'm ready to leave this." Back at home, Claire sat at the kitchen table, a list in front of her. Megan's instructions echoed in her mind. Save the documents. Gather the evidence. Secure a safe place. She took a deep breath and began organizing everything. There was no time for doubts. Sophie appeared in the kitchen doorway, smiling, holding a new drawing in her hands. "Mommy, look! I drew us playing in the park." Claire took the paper and saw. It was her and Sophie holding hands, smiling, with the sun shining above them. Claire smiled. "I'm going to give us this life, sweetheart. No matter what it takes." With the drawing held tightly against her chest, Claire finally felt her heart grow lighter. The future was near. The clock read 5 p.m. The house was silent, the distant sound of the wind tapping against the windows. Claire was in Sophie's room, carefully folding small clothes and placing them in a discreet suitcase. Each movement was precise, almost like a ritual. Sophie entered the room, holding her favorite teddy bear in her arms. "Mommy, why are you packing my clothes?" Claire stopped, looking at her daughter with tenderness. She knelt beside her, gently holding her small hands. "Because we're going to live in a place just for us, sweetheart. A place where you'll feel very happy and safe." Sophie furrowed her brow, thoughtful. "And Daddy?" Claire took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Daddy will stay here, but you and I will have a new home. It's a special place, just for us." Sophie hesitated for a moment, and then smiled faintly. "Can I bring my teddy bear?" Claire smiled back, tears beginning to form in her eyes. She leaned in to kiss her daughter's forehead. "Of course you can, my love. He's coming with us." The sound of the door opening made Claire's heart race. She knew Adam was home. Sophie was sitting on the couch, watching a cartoon, while Claire finished organizing the documents and the suitcase in the bedroom. Adam entered with firm steps and a hardened expression. He slammed his briefcase on the table, looked around, and noticed something was off. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice filled with suspicion. Claire came out of the bedroom, the discreet suitcase still on the bed. Her voice was calm, but there was firmness in it. "Adam, we need to talk." Adam narrowed his eyes, realizing something was different. "Talk about what?" Claire took a deep breath. She could feel the weight of the moment, but she didn't back down. "I'm leaving, Adam. Sophie and I are going to live somewhere else." The silence that followed was cutting. Adam stood still, as if he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Then he laughed, a bitter laugh that echoed through the room. "You've got to be joking. Claire, you're nothing without me. How do you think you're going to survive?" Claire's heart pounded faster, but she stood her ground. She remembered Anna's and Megan's words and responded calmly. "I prepared for this. I have a place to live, a job, and a lawyer handling everything. Don't try to intimidate me, Adam. You don't have that power anymore." Adam stepped forward, his tone growing more threatening. "You're making a mistake, Claire. I'll take Sophie from you. You'll see." Claire didn't look away. For the first time, she faced him without trembling. "Sophie is my priority, and you won't stop me from taking care of her." Adam went quiet, his fists clenched, unable to comprehend the woman now speaking with such confidence. He pointed at Claire in a final attempt to scare her. "You're going to regret this." Claire didn't respond. Instead, she called softly to Sophie. "Come on, sweetheart." Sophie came running, her teddy bear clutched tightly in her arms. Claire grabbed the suitcase, held her daughter's hand, and walked through the living room, out the front door without looking back. Claire's car moved down the road as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the back seat, Sophie stared out the window, holding her teddy bear. The silence inside the car was different now. There was no fear, just an empty calm, but one filled with hope. Claire felt the wheel steady beneath her hands, though her heart still raced. She glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Sophie smile softly. "Mommy, where's our new house?" Claire smiled, wiping away a tear that had escaped. "Not far, sweetheart. You're going to love it. It's a place just for us." Sophie nodded and turned back to the window. Claire took a deep breath, feeling the weight she had carried for so many years finally start to lift. "I did it. I finally did it." Hours later, Claire and Sophie arrived at the small apartment. It was simple, with white walls and a few pieces of furniture. But there was a peace here that Claire hadn't felt in a long time. She set the suitcase down and looked around, breathing deeply. For the first time, she felt at home. Sophie ran to the window and looked up at the starry sky. "Mommy, there are stars here." Claire smiled, feeling a wave of emotion. She approached and hugged her daughter from behind, looking out with her. "Yes, sweetheart. Now we can see the stars." Sophie turned and hugged Claire tightly. "I like our new house, Mommy." Claire closed her eyes, holding her daughter close as tears streamed freely down her face. They were tears of relief, of hope. "I promised we would be okay. And now we're free." The final scene shows Claire and Sophie side by side, gazing at the starry sky. It's a simple but powerful moment, a symbol of the new beginning and the freedom Claire had finally won for both of them. The sunlight streamed gently through the apartment windows, illuminating the white walls with golden tones. Claire opened her eyes slowly and for a moment felt disoriented. Soon, she saw Sophie sleeping beside her on the makeshift bed, hugging her teddy bear. Claire smiled, feeling a lightness she hadn't known in a long time. She stood up, walked to the window and opened it, letting the fresh morning air fill the room. She looked outside, at the quiet street where the world continued to turn, but this time, she was standing on her own. "This is freedom," she thought. "It's not perfect, but it's ours." Suddenly, Sophie appeared by her side, still sleepy. "Good morning, Mommy," she murmured, yawning. Claire knelt and hugged her tightly. "Good morning, sweetheart. Ready for a special breakfast?" Sophie smiled, excited, and ran to the small kitchen table. Claire began making pancakes while Sophie drew. It was a simple scene, but one full of meaning. When Sophie showed her drawing, Claire stopped. It was a house, but this time with open windows, flowers at the door, and a blue sky lit by a bright sun. "This is our house, Mommy," Sophie said proudly. Claire held the drawing to her chest, moved. "It's perfect, my love. Perfect." That afternoon, Claire and Sophie went to Anna Lewis's office for a final session. Sophie played in the corner with colored pencils while Claire spoke with Anna, seated in the comfortable armchair. "You seem different, Claire," Anna observed with a warm smile. "What's changed?" Claire took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I left, Anna. I found the courage and left. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most important." Anna nodded, satisfied. "And how do you feel now?" Claire thought for a moment, her expression serene. "I still feel scared sometimes. Adam is still out there, but he doesn't scare me in the same way anymore. Now I know I'm capable. I'm no longer that small, silent woman." Anna smiled, proud of Claire's progress. "You broke the cycle, Claire. The courage you've shown will teach Sophie what real love is. Respect, freedom, and safety." Claire looked over at Sophie, who was happily drawing in the corner of the room, and nodded with tears in her eyes. "I did it for her, but also for myself. Finally, I chose me." Anna placed the family constellation board in front of Claire. "Now move the pieces one last time. Arrange them as you see yourself today." Claire picked up the piece that represented her and placed it in the center, with Sophie's piece beside hers. The piece representing Adam was pushed away, outside the circle. Claire smiled, looking at the arrangement. "Just the two of us. Together. Happy." Anna observed, satisfied. "This is the life you've chosen, Claire. And it's the life you deserve." Later that afternoon, Claire and Sophie sat in the park under the shade of a large tree. Sophie ran across the grass, laughing as she blew soap bubbles that shimmered in the sunlight. Claire watched her, feeling a peace she had never felt before. Sophie ran back to her mother and flopped beside her, out of breath but smiling. "Mommy, are you happy?" Claire smiled, holding her daughter's small hands between hers. "Yes, my love. Mommy is very happy." Sophie looked up at her with bright eyes and said, almost like a secret, "I'm happy too. I like our new house." Claire hugged her tightly, closing her eyes and letting the tears flow freely. They weren't tears of sadness, but of gratitude and relief. "We're going to be okay, Sophie. Always." As the sun began to set on the horizon, Claire watched her daughter run across the grass again. For the first time, she felt the future was open, full of possibilities. She took a deep breath, smiling up at the sky. "I am no longer a prisoner of the past. I chose freedom, I chose life, and I chose myself. Now, tomorrow belongs to us. Claire and Sophie walked hand in hand through the park, the sky tinged with golden hues and the sound of their laughter filling the air. It was a simple but powerful moment, symbolizing new beginnings, liberation, and the unconditional love between a mother and her daughter. Claire's journey reminds us that, no matter how difficult the circumstances, there is always a way out. With courage, support, and love, we can break the cycles that imprison us and build a lighter, happier future. This story is a reminder that you are stronger than you think and deserve to be happy.